What if I told you there's a common garden vegetable that's been linked to causing heart disease, stroke, migraines, and in the 1970s was nearly made illegal, and yet is still widely grown and consumed? In this video, we unpack why. An investigation that takes us far outside the garden and involves organised crime syndicates, fraud, forged scientific papers, and just a sprinkling of some facts that will make you a better home cook for the rest of your life. Now let's dig in. Our story starts in 1965 in God bless the US of A. With the passing of a law that would be the butterfly that flaps its wings to set this story in motion. The 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act. This act lifted many immigration restrictions and led to a surge of immigration from a wide range of countries, however with particularly high numbers from Southeast Asia. And coming with them was a huge range of culinary diversity. At the time, Italian-American restaurants were a big hit, selling big, hearty meals, pizza and the pasta and the antipasti gabagool. Now you could probably imagine if you have a large group of legitimate businessmen who control large portions of the food distribution in the United States, especially for Italian-American food, and you start seeing one other cuisine, Chinese food, explode onto the scene, introducing millions of Americans to cheap, flavorful meals and completely new dishes that are really taking customers away from your Italian restaurants. And imagine this same group of legitimate businessmen also has really strong media connections and influence. Then one day in 1968, a single letter gets published in the New England Journal of Medicine, NEJM, by Dr. Robert Ho-Man Kwok, a Chinese-American physician who wrote a letter called Chinese Restaurant Syndrome. Describing a set of symptoms he claimed to experience after eating at Chinese restaurants, including numbness, heart palpitations, and headaches. Now, this letter wasn't a scientific study. It was just a casual anecdote. However, the media latched onto it, sensationalizing the idea of Chinese restaurant syndrome. Newspapers and magazines began pumping the Chinese restaurant syndrome narrative, sparking fear in the heart of many Americans, leading to and creating a huge movement of avoiding Chinese food in restaurants. In the letter of the journal, Dr. Kwok speculated what might cause this Chinese restaurant syndrome: an unlikely scapegoat, a humble Japanese ingredient. And this will come back to garden vegetables. Trust me, we need to go away and then it'll come back and it'll make sense. You will definitely want to find out how not to poison yourself with your homegrown veggies. But if you want to learn how to cook perfectly safe ingredients into perfectly delicious meals, I'd love to recommend this Kitchen Confidence course by Julie Yoon on Skillshare, who is sponsoring today's video. Whether you want to learn cooking or productivity or gardening or illustration or all of them at once, you can without having to pay for each individual course. As someone who just loves learning new things, Skillshare is the most valuable service on the internet. Some of you would probably notice on my second channel recently, I secretly launched a podcast called Clickworthy, where I try and help other small creators grow, and I also just talk about a lot of the behind the scenes of culinary garden. And to record and edit and upload and distribute that podcast to all the different platforms, I had to learn a whole new skill set of stuff that I didn't know before. So I took this Podcasting Secrets short course and I was up to speed in no time. And for the first 500 of you that use the link in my description, you get the first 30 days free. You can learn like 5 new skills in that time. Now back to the video where we continue our story in 1908, Japan. In 1908 Japan, a chemist named Ikane Akita was enjoying a bowl of dashi, a traditional Japanese soup made with kombu, a type of seaweed. Akita noticed a savory taste that was distinct from the 4 basic tastes of sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. This flavor, which he described as a pleasant, savory taste, was commonly found in Japanese cuisine, especially in dishes featuring seaweed, soy sauce, miso. Akita called this new taste umami, derived from the Japanese word umai, meaning delicious. Determined to understand the source of umami, Akita began studying kombu in his laboratory at Tokyo Imperial University. Through some meticulous experimentation, he isolated an amino acid naturally present in the seaweed. If you don't know, amino acids are the main ingredient in protein, and as it turns out, humans have evolved to be able to detect when amino acids are present in food, because that helps us find protein. which of course is one of our macronutrients. It's very important for our health. And those amino acids are essentially what savory flavors are. This is also why mushrooms have a meaty taste, because they're rich in amino acids. Now there are 20 different amino acids, and Akita was able to isolate the exact one in kombu that gave it that umami flavor, that exact note of savoriness. He found that glutamic acid was responsible for the rich, savory taste he had identified. However, glutamic acid on its own wasn't stable enough for practical use. To make it easier to use in cooking, Akita neutralized it with some sodium, salt, creating a stable crystalline form of glutamic acid called monosodium glutamate, or when abbreviated, MSG. All right, back to America. So Dr. Kwok speculated in his original letter that MSG could be the cause of Chinese restaurant syndrome, which newspapers and magazines latched onto this really quickly and began to claim it was responsible for a wide range of symptoms, painting it as this dangerous chemical additive rather than a simple sodium salt glutamic acid, a naturally occurring compound. Now, it's probably important to note that this panic over Chinese food was painted against a complex backdrop of anti-immigration and anti-Chinese sentiment in the American public. There were many calls to completely ban MSG, make it illegal. Many products and restaurants were forced to start displaying no MSG labeling. In Australia, the cultural echoes of this are still felt. Most Chinese restaurants will still have a no MSG sign on the front window. Following Kwok's letter, a series of studies attempted to investigate MSG's effects. In 1969, a neuroscientist, John Olney, did a study on mice who, when given MSG, ended up with brain lesions. And in the 1970s, early human trials began attempting to replicate Chinese restaurant syndrome, and participants that were given MSG reported heart palpitations and headaches, high body temperatures. But there was just one problem with all these studies. They were completely bogus or deeply, deeply flawed. In the mice trials, the mice were injected with MSG and in doses that would be physically impossible for humans to consume as food. In the early human trials, there were no proper control groups and participants were told, "You're being given MSG," leading to strong placebo effects. There has been considerable speculation about whether these studies were intentionally designed to link MSG to Chinese restaurant syndrome due to influences like xenophobia or organized crime, but no concrete evidence supports this claim. By the 1980s, better controlled studies began to show that MSG was not harmful in typical dietary amounts. However, earlier flawed studies had already cemented the myth in the public consciousness. By the 1990s and 2000s, more rigorous scientific research had completely debunked the idea that MSG is harmful to the general population. Studies have shown that MSG is safe to consume in all normal amounts and is metabolized no differently than glutamate found in natural foods. Global health organizations have marked MSG as completely safe to eat. However, the cultural damage is done. Most people today still think that MSG is an extreme health risk. Even though it's actually naturally occurring, MSG and glutamic acid can be found in many common foods like cheese and mushrooms and seaweed and soy sauce and meat and fish and eggs and walnuts and almonds, sunflower seeds, kimchi, sauerkraut, corn, peas, broccoli, garlic, and tomatoes. Humans have been eating glutamic acid for thousands of years, and the West has been eating the shelf-stable version of MSG since the 1930s. Campbell's soups, cured meats, snack foods. The use of MSG in World War II was considered a breakthrough in the quality of military rations. In Australia, if you look on the back of most product labels, you'll see Flavor Enhancer 621, which is just the rebranding of MSG. Twisties and Arnott's shapes, 2-minute noodles, salami, cabana pizzas, sausage rolls, pies, chicken and beef stocks. You've probably been eating MSG your whole life and never knew. And the punchline to this story is the fact that if MSG was ever made illegal, we'd no longer have tomatoes, cheese, mushrooms, and garlic. So I don't think those Italian restaurants would have had much left to serve their customers. Just olive oil, wine, and basil, which is probably actually kind of think of it's a banger rooftop bar idea. The cultural effects of this has slowly been starting to get reversed in the last couple decades. Many celebrity chefs have started championing MSG again and starting to try and reintroduce it back into the culinary vocabulary of the average home cook. And if you're really into cooking or home gardening, you might know that San Roma tomatoes are the gold standard, best sourcing tomatoes in the world. And when analyzed, the reason this is because they have the naturally highest occurring amounts of MSG. This video has been the longest work in progress on the channel. In fact, it was one of my first couple of video ideas, but I've waited till now to finally make it because I needed to practice a couple times to do this story justice. So a big thank you to the Patreons for supporting the channel up until this point, and if you want to support the channel, make sure to leave this video a green thumbs up or consider checking out the Patreon. Remember to use my link in the description when you want to learn with Skillshare. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.